10 Viking surnames still alive in Europe today. Long before passports, databases, and family trees, names in the north worked differently. The Vikings did not usually pass down fixed surnames the way many European families do now. Instead, they used a practical system based on ancestry. A son could be known as the son of his father, and a daughter could be known as the daughter of her father. In the Old Norse world, a name was not just a label, it was a small map of belonging. Over time, those naming habits hardened into family names. What began as a description became a surname. What once changed from generation to generation eventually became fixed on paper, in church records, in legal documents, and later in national registers. And that is why modern Europe is still full of names that carry the rhythm of the Viking Age. When you see surnames like Hansen, Anderson, Eriksson, or Svensson on a mailbox in Oslo, a football shirt in Stockholm, or a business sign in Copenhagen, you are looking at something older than it first appears. These names survived Christianization, kingdoms, migrations, wars, modernization, and the long, slow rise of the modern state. The most interesting part is that they do not sound exotic, they sound ordinary. That is how history often hides, not in ruins, not in museums, not only in sagas, but in the names people still answer to every day. Here are 10 Viking surnames still alive in Europe today. Number 10. Hansen. Hansen is one of the most recognizable surnames in Denmark and Norway. It means son of Hans. Hans itself is a Scandinavian form of Johannes or John, a name that spread strongly after Christianity reached the north. But the structure of the surname is much older. The ending -sen means son, and it reflects the Old Nordic patronymic habit of identifying a person through their father. In the Viking world, a person did not need a permanent family surname in the modern sense. A man named Hans could have a son known as Hansen. The name told people where he came from, who his father was, and where he belonged in the web of kinship. Today, Hansen is still common across Scandinavia, especially in Denmark and Norway. It appears in sports, politics, business, literature, and everyday life. It feels modern because it never disappeared, but under its simple surface is a very old idea: identity carried through lineage. Number 9. Nielsen. Nielsen means son of Niels. Niels is the Danish and Scandinavian form of Nicholas. Like Hansen, Nielsen comes from the patronymic naming system that shaped Nordic identity for centuries. The name is especially common in Denmark. It is one of those surnames that seems to belong to the landscape itself. You can imagine it on a farmhouse, in a harbor town, on a shop sign, or in a city apartment block. It is flexible, familiar, and deeply rooted. What makes Nielsen interesting is the way it combines two layers of European history. The given name Niels came through Christian influence, but the way the surname is built belongs to the older Nordic pattern. It is a reminder that cultures do not simply replace one another, they blend. The Old Norse habit of naming survived even as new Christian names entered the region. That is why Nielsen is not just a common surname. It is a small record of cultural change. Number 8. Anderson. Anderson means son of Anders. Anders is the Scandinavian form of Andrew. This surname is especially famous in Denmark and Norway, and it has become known far beyond Scandinavia. The name has a clean, balanced sound. It feels both old and approachable. Like many Nordic surnames, it does not try to impress through ornament. It is direct. It tells you the relationship first. For centuries, this kind of name was practical. In a village, a port, or a farming district, people needed to know who belonged to whom. Kinship mattered. Family ties could define protection, inheritance, responsibility, and reputation. A name like Anderson carried useful social information. Today, Anderson is still found across Europe, carried by writers, artists, athletes, scholars, and ordinary families. It is one of those names that proves a simple form can outlive almost everything around it. Number 7. Larsson. Larsson means son of Lars. Lars comes from Laurentius, a Latin name that spread across Europe through Christian tradition. But once again, the surname itself follows the old Scandinavian pattern. Larsson is common in Denmark and Norway. It has a strong, compact feel, and that may be part of why it has lasted so well. It is easy to say, easy to remember, and hard to mistake. The story of Larsson also shows how the Viking naming tradition adapted rather than vanished. The Vikings and their descendants did not live in isolation forever. They traded, raided, settled, converted, married, and absorbed influences from across Europe. New names came in, but the old way of building identity remained. So Larsson is not purely Viking in every detail. Few modern surnames are, but it is Viking in structure, Nordic in habit, and Scandinavian in survival. Number 6. Jensen. Jensen means son of Jens. Jens is another Scandinavian form of John, and Jensen is one of the most common surnames in Denmark. If you are looking for a surname that shows how deeply the patronymic system shaped Scandinavian society, Jensen is one of the clearest examples. It is everywhere. It belongs not to a single noble family or a single dramatic legend, but to the broad population. That is what makes it powerful. Some historical names survive because they were attached to kings. Others survive because ordinary people kept using them. Jensen belongs to the second category. It is a name of continuity, not spectacle. In the Viking Age, fame mattered, but family mattered more. Your father's name could place you in the world. Jensen still carries that logic. It is plain, durable, and unmistakably Nordic. Number 5, Pedersen. Pedersen means son of Petter, and Petter is a Scandinavian form of Peter. The related spelling, Peterson, is also widely used, especially in Denmark and Northern Europe. Pedersen is another surname built from the old patronymic system. The father gives the root, and the child receives the suffix. In earlier centuries, this could change from one generation to the next. A man named Peter might have a son called Pedersen, but that son, if named Lars, could have children called Larsson. Over time, however, many of these names became fixed and passed down as family surnames. This shift from flexible patronymic to fixed surname was a major change. It shows the growth of bureaucracy, church records, taxation, military lists, and modern administration. But the names themselves kept the older shape. Pedersen is still widely alive today, especially in Denmark and Norway. It is a quiet survivor from a world where names were practical tools of memory. Number 4. Johansen. Johansen means son of Johan. Johan is another northern form of John, and the surname is common in Norway and Denmark. Johansen has a slightly more formal sound than some of the other names on this list. It feels steady and established, but its origins are just as practical. It grew from the same old pattern, a father's name followed by son. The endurance of Johansen tells us something important about Scandinavian naming. These surnames were not preserved because they were rare. They survived because they were useful and because they became woven into daily life. By the time surnames became legally fixed in different parts of Scandinavia, names like Johansen had already been used for generations. They were familiar enough to remain and strong enough to pass forward. Today, Johansen still belongs to living families across Europe. It is a name that does not shout its age, but carries it calmly. Number 3. Eriksson. Eriksson means son of Erik. This is one of the most iconic Swedish surnames, and it carries a particularly strong connection to the Old North. Erik is a classic Scandinavian given name with deep roots. It was borne by kings, warriors, and legendary figures. The name itself is often associated with ideas of power, rule, and honor. When paired with the patronymic ending "esson," it becomes Eriksson, the son of Erik. In Sweden, the "esson" ending is especially characteristic. It is the Swedish equivalent of the Danish and Norwegian "senres." Both point back to the same basic idea, but each region developed its own spelling and sound. Eriksson feels like a surname that could have stepped directly out of a saga, yet it remains completely modern. You can find it in sports, technology, business, music, and public life. That is the strange beauty of these names. They can feel ancient and contemporary at the same time. Number 2, Karlsson. Karlsson means son of Karl. Karl is an old Germanic and Nordic name, and it has remained important across Northern Europe for centuries. In Sweden, Karlsson is one of the most common and recognizable surnames. It has a sturdy, practical sound like something built to last. There is no mystery in its meaning, but there is real depth in its survival. The name Karl was not only personal. In some contexts, it could also carry meanings connected to a free man or a man of status. That gives Karlsson an especially interesting flavor. At its simplest, it means the son of Karl. But behind it is the wider social world of the North, where names could reflect family, rank, memory, and identity. Karlsson survived because it fit ordinary life. It was easy to use, easy to pass down, and deeply familiar. Like many Viking-descended surnames, it became powerful through repetition. Number 1. Svensson. Svensson means son of Sven. Sven is one of the most characterful Old Nordic names, and it has strong roots in the Scandinavian world. The name Sven is often linked with meanings connected to a young man, a youth, or a young warrior. That gives Svensson one of the strongest Viking flavors on this list. It is not only built in the old patronymic style, its root name also feels deeply native to the north. In Sweden, Svensson remains a very common surname. In fact, it is sometimes used almost as a symbol of the ordinary Swedish person, the way certain common surnames in other countries can stand for the average citizen. But ordinary does not mean empty. Svensson is ordinary because it survived so completely. It passed from generation to generation until it became part of the modern landscape. That may be the most powerful kind of historical survival, not a name locked away in a royal chronicle, but a name still spoken at school, printed on mail, signed on forms, and called out in public. So what do these surnames really tell us? They tell us that the Viking Age did not simply vanish. Of course, the ships are gone. The old pagan temples are gone. The world of raids, feuds, chieftains, and long winter halls has passed into history. But some patterns survived because people kept using them. Naming is one of the most intimate forms of tradition. It lives inside families. It follows children into adulthood. It crosses borders without asking permission. It can survive even when people forget exactly where it came from. Hansen, Nielsen, Anderson, Larsen, Jensen, Pedersen, Johansson, Eriksson, Carlson, and Svensson are not museum pieces. They are living artifacts. They are part of modern Europe, but they still carry the structure of the Old North. Every time one of these names is spoken, written, signed, or remembered, it repeats a pattern that began more than 1,000 years ago. A father, a child, a family, a line of memory. That is why these surnames matter. They remind us that history is not always distant. Sometimes it is sitting beside us on a train, printed on a passport, stitched onto a sports jersey, or waiting in an email signature. The Vikings are often remembered through ships, axes, sagas, and battles, but their quieter legacy may be even more lasting. It is in the names, and those names are still alive.